too with Ryan Fitzpatrick. This guy is coming into his own. Steve Johnson is turning out to be one heck of a wide receiver. And you've already got Lee Evans up there. So getting a little bit sidetracked. That Buffalo Bills offense, since they're so bad, they will be valuable as a passing team.
Yeah, I think you're right too, Phil. And let's not only talk about passing, let's talk about the wide receivers so far to date. And there's two guys that I totally hit on my draft that I was just so keen on. And that's
Let's give Robbie a big pat on the back here.
And Akeem Nicks, because I knew going in, I had the 7th round. I was like, man, it's going to be Manningham, Nicks, Steve Smith. Who do I want to grab out of these 3 guys? And I went with the 6'1" wide receiver. He plays bigger on the field because of his big hands. He's starting to get it done for this New York Giants passing attack. It's been so lethal so far this season.
Yeah, he leads the NFL in touchdown receptions, that's for sure. I mean, this is just the craziest list after halfway through the season that I can ever remember seeing. Hakeem Nicks, Austin Collie, Brandon Lloyd, Jeremy Maclin, Kenny Britt. Are you kidding me? Who are these guys? And Steve Smith. Well, again, but who are these guys?
I don't know. You know what? You could have gotten these guys so late in the draft. So does that mean, Phil, wide receivers are a dime a dozen in fantasy?
In auction leagues, it is worth it to save your money, even in point per reception leagues, because you can get guys like this off the waiver wire. It's a crapshoot. You have to pay attention to the waiver wire to get these guys. But, and will they be able to hold their Austin Collie starting to get hurt? Brandon Lloyd, a lot of weapons there in Denver, but they seem to be continue to get it done week in and week out.
Yeah, another guy I want to key up on too is Kenny Britt. A guy who's been his 2nd season out of Rutgers. He's been playing out of his mind. I mean, if you had this guy, you started him last week, which was an anomaly because he had that incident in the strip club where he got into a fight and didn't start. This guy gave you 45 points in fantasy this past week.
How do you get in a fight in a strip club, man?
I don't know. You know
what? How are you going to be funny? A girl?
He's got so much money and people are just, I guess, jealous of the guy. But let's be jealous of his talent.
Pay attention.
Let's be jealous of his talent so far in this short season. I mean, what is he doing? He only has 23 catches, but 7 of those 23 catches have been for touchdowns.
He makes them count. And again, the Tennessee Titans going forward are another one of those teams that we've talked about for the past several weeks. Very favorable passing matchups down the stretch here. So keep an eye on this Tennessee Titan players. I don't know if we'll see a guy like Nate Washington come back and maybe pick up some of that slack there.
It's going to be tough because he's kind of buried on the depth chart right now. I think Kenny Britt has emerged as the number 1 guy and the top target for Vince Young or Kerry Collins right now. And in doing so, he's giving you a great amount of success.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we better take a moment here. We're going to shoot over to Amanda Walker over the news center. It's definitely time to find out what's going on with some of these injuries, who's going to be in, who's going to be out, and who's on bye. So, Amanda, go ahead and tell us what's going on in the news.
Minnesota Vikings diva quarterback Brett Favre has 2 fractures in his ankle. Favre, who has hurt his ankle against Green Bay, might be in jeopardy of snapping his consecutive games played mark. If he can't go, Tavares Jackson will start in his place against New England. Niners quarterback Alex Smith will be out 2 to 3 weeks with a separated left shoulder. This makes Troy Smith the starter in the game against the Broncos being played overseas in London. Smith is a non-start in all leagues since he has 2 games played in his career. Titans running back Chris Johnson is nursing a thigh injury and is questionable this week at San Diego. Johnson was held to his 66 yards last week and was relieved by running back Javon Ringer in their victory against the Eagles. Lions quarterback Matthew Stafford will start against the Red Hot Redskins this Sunday. Stafford has missed the whole season since separating his shoulder week 1 against the Bears. Expect Stafford to get shut down, and he will be a non-factor this Sunday. D'Angelo Williams of the Carolina Panthers may miss his next game against the Rams. Williams has been bothered by a sprained foot and will be seen as the number 2 featured back this weekend. If you have anyone else on your team, the experts say not to start him. There are a lot of buys this week, so if you have anyone on the Falcons, Bears, Browns, Giants, Eagles, or Ravens, do not start them. The key fantasy players you need to look out for include quarterbacks Eli Manning and Joe Flacco. For running backs, Michael Turner, Ahmad Bradshaw, Matt Forte, Peyton Hillis, and one-year wonder Ray Rice. And lastly, for wide receivers, Roddy White, Hakeem Nicks, and Anquan Bolden. Thank you for joining me in the Fantasy Sports News Center. I'm Amanda Walker. Now back to Phil and Robbie in the studio.
Hey, thanks a lot, Amanda, for the news updates there. Crazy. I mean, Tony Romo. I mean, now Chris Johnson might be hurt. I mean, some key guys are starting to go down. I mean, there's been so many injuries this entire season within the NFL.
Well, that's what happens, especially if they want to prolong a season to 18 games. I mean, it's really going to cut down the fantasy value of some of these guys. You got to take into account injuries. Injuries are part of the game, man.
And it's going to really make that whole running back by committee thing even more popular in the NFL going forward if they ever did do something like increase the season to 18 games. We're not going to debate that because that is a useless topic to debate for fantasy football right now. Robbie, we have been talking to people over the past couple weeks on trades they can make for players to get themselves into playoff contention. Hopefully they've had some luck in jockeying and making these trades. Now that they have made some trades, got some players that are going to carry them into the promised land for fantasy football championships. One of the things that we like to try to do is forecast what's going to happen in weeks 15 and 16 in fantasy matchups based on what we know today. Who are the good defenses and who are the bad defenses? And you want to try to position yourself to play against teams that have bad defenses in weeks 15 and 16. Some of those defenses off the top of your head, Robbie: Houston, Indianapolis, Washington, Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Who else? Who are the good defenses?
Some of the good defenses, the Oakland Raiders play great, excellent coverage. They don't give up too many big plays. Obviously.
In theory, they do. We'll find out later. They actually give up fantasy points. Go on.
Kansas City Chiefs usually have a very, very strong secondary. They just drafted Eric Berry in the first round. He's been playing incredible, probably Defensive Player of the Year. Then you also look at, a Minnesota, a Tennessee. You might want to even throw up the Cleveland Browns because they stopped Drew Brees on Sunday. I mean, he couldn't do anything. So it's crazy so far. I mean, this NFL season has been really ridiculous.
And some of these notoriously bad defenses, like you mentioned Cleveland, I'll bring up St. Louis. St. Louis is a team that I think is starting to play some of the best defense in the NFL. I mean, the complete shutdown of the San Diego Chargers a couple of weeks ago was one of the more impressive defensive performances of the year. So let's look at the quarterbacks and the receivers, the passing matchups for weeks 15 and 16. And we'll look at guys that have good matchups, guys that you might want to try to trade for. Robbie, who are some of the guys that are going to have good matchups in the playoffs weeks that we want to try to trade for? What are the teams and who are the players?
Well, some of the teams, some of the players you look at, just, first of all, that just jumps right out of the page is Phillip Rivers of the San Diego Chargers. I mean, this guy's going up against the San Francisco 49ers in Week 15. He's going against the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 16. If you have this guy, I mean, you're locked. If you're in the playoffs and you have a great quarterback, this guy will get, because look at the charts don't lie. 48.2 playoff average. That's unheard of. If you get at least 35 to 40, that's excellent. So you really want that. You really want a guy like on your team, especially Matt Ryan going against the Seattle Seahawks or New Orleans Saints. He's another guy to have on your team down the stretch. And you know what? You might want to even take a shot with Matt Castle at the helm because he's going up against St. Louis and Tennessee. Yeah, Tennessee isn't. Cortland Finnegan really hasn't been a ball hawk as years past. But they have been giving up late touchdowns, and that's what you want to see if you're not only a Chiefs fan, but a fantasy fan of Matt Castle.
Yeah, and people several weeks ago probably would have called this crazy, but we've been pumping Matt Castle for at least the last 2 or 3 weeks.
He has weapons
with favorable matchups and some top weapons. And not only that, but probably the best running attack in the entire league. Again, with the San Diego thing, I have to go back and say that this is the reason why I think Phillip Rivers is definitely going to break Dan Marino's record. I still think Manning is too. They're going to break Dan Marino's passing record, and that Phillip Rivers is poised to have the best passing season in NFL history, especially as long as he keeps Gates healthy. But some of the teams that have tougher matchups. I mean, these are the players. If you have these players on your team, these are the guys you might want to start to trade. The ones that have the bad passing matchups for the players that have the good passing matchups. Who are some of the quarterbacks or receivers you can trade on that list?
Well, some of the quarterbacks you might want to consider trading is Drew Brees because if you look at it, he's playing up against Baltimore Ravens secondary. Now, I know that their Baltimore Ravens secondary it was very uncharacteristic of the secondary, giving up over 325 yards in an overtime victory against the Buffalo Bills. You saw a few key guys emerge on that we just discussed. But then also you look at the New York Giants. I mean, even though they're playing against the Houston Texans, Houston, their secondary isn't as good, but you just made a move. Brian Cushing's now he's now the middle linebacker. He's going to anchor that defense. A big responsibility for a young kid like Cushing, but I think he's going to rise to the challenge. Then you also look at New England. They're playing against Green Bay and they're playing up against Buffalo. Two very good secondaries. So you never know what you're going to get down the stretch.
Yeah, it's really tough to trade for the quarterbacks. The